Hey everybody, today we are going to be going over how to STIG a local Windows machine. And I'd like to include, if you need to, you can set the execution policy on your machine to bypass if you get any issues while trying to run a PowerShell script. Alright, so to start, I have a blank STIG checklist. Let's open it up. Okay, as you can see, it's a blank Windows version 2 release 4. Alright, so to start, we're going to convert it to an XML object. After all, STIG checklists are just a certain XML schema. Alright, so yeah, as we could see, I just like to double check with the built-in PowerShell function. It's an XML document. Alright, so let's actually open it up so we could see what it looks like in Notepad. If you open it up in Notepad++, I'm pretty sure it looks a lot nicer actually, just so you know. So you can see this XML tag here, it's checklist. We want to actually be able to get down to the vulnerabilities, which is down here, this vuln tag. As you can see, there's vulnerability numbers and whatnot. We need to be able to check on the status of the certain vulnerabilities. We need to be able to check whatever the STIG is looking for, and we need to be able to manipulate that so we can output it to a different checklist file, which we'll set a variable for now. Let's put it on our documents. Final Windows. Actually, why don't I just put STIG output? Alright. So, let's actually dig into all the vulnerabilities. As we saw here, we have to start digging into these XML tags. So since it's an XML object, we can simply do that in PowerShell by doing this. So we're at the checklist tag. We need to go down to STIGs, and then iSTIG. And in iSTIG, we can grab the status and whatnot. But we also, actually, sorry, we need to go down to vuln to even get the status. And let's just run this here. Let's see what we got. Alright, so we have some vulnerability information. We see all the statuses of everything. Let's create a for loop to go through all those different statuses. Alright, so the reason I created a for loop was because if we just tried to manipulate any sort of individual variable when we had this all vulns here, you know, you'd be manipulating all of them at the same time. So obviously you'd want to create a for loop here. And I created a status variable so we can simply grab the status of each individual vulnerability. But as you can see, we don't have vulnerability numbers. We don't have rule IDs, we don't have descriptions, we don't have all sorts of information that you would see in the actual checklist. So to get that, you can do you can grab the child nodes property from the actual individual vulnerability, and let's run the script to initialize our variables. Alright, now as we can see, we have a bunch more information. So let's just start by grabbing the vulnerability number. And for the record, I'm just trying to do this as fast as possible, so you could just use this as a method. You just can, use it as a reference and get ideas of how you want to build your script. So let's do this. Actually, let's Alright, so what I'm doing here is when we called child nodes, as you can see, you have the vuln attributes and attribute data, and we're accessing the first index of what we got returned, which will be vulnerability number, and we're accessing the attribute data property, so we'll directly grab the text of right here. And let's just see if that worked. Alright, so we have the text. And just for the record, if we didn't grab the text, let's see if we didn't just grab attribute data here. You'll also see vuln num output. When you output that to a CSV file, it looks it outputs this system.xml.xml setting or something like that, and it's not actually what you want. So we need to be careful with how we access this data, so that's why we actually get the text. Alright. So status is not reviewed. Alright, so let's take a look at one example in a Windows STIG checklist here. It's a setting that I actually already set on my machine, so we can do some comparisons and mark the STIG checklist item accordingly in our output. So, alright, this one's related to cloud content. Let me just filter for that. Oh, and I'd just like to stress, by the way, the reason for automating Windows STIG checklist in the first place, I like to do, the only reason to do it would be after you import SCAV results, because this tool already automates a lot of these checks for you. So I ran a SCAV on my machine earlier. This is the output. Let's go to cloud content. So this is the actual machine, or this is the item that I changed after I ran the SCAV. So before I ran the SCAV, it wasn't here, but it's actually this one. I didn't change this item. This one I changed. But as you can see, it wasn't checked by the SCAV, and that's why I'm even checking it in the script. Alright, so the vulnerability number for this one is 220872. So what we can do I'm just going to write host really quick just to do a check when we run it. It should write host. Obviously this vulnerability number here, and it didn't. So let's see why it didn't. Oh, well, that's why, I think. Alright, I just had the wrong syntax there for my variable. Alright, so now we know we actually have a match here. So let's just write the host, or let's write to host whatever the status is for what we're looking for. So in this scenario, the status, it's this variable. Alright. So we know that this one's not reviewed in our checklist. Our blank checklist here, status is not reviewed. Let's actually just go over here. Yeah. Alright, so let's do this actual check. What's this STIG checklist asking for? Alright. So we need to check if this registry key exists, disable third-party suggestions. It needs to be a D-word value of 1 in order for this to not be a finding. As you can see in Registry Editor, I did set this to 1. So in PowerShell, to do this, let's save it to a variable equals. So it's under HKey current user for the registry hive, and then this is the path that I've copied to my clipboard. So let's see. So since it's under HKey current user, you access that hive like this in PowerShell, and then you access the path like that. And the specific value it wants us to look for is disable third-party suggestions. So let's see if we can get that. Alright, so we have selected specifically that. And we can see the value is 1, which is what the STIG wants us to look for. So set up another if condition here. To access this specific property, we will just go like this in PowerShell. It's a syntax. So if this, and by the way I'll show you just by running that, yeah, it output 1 here. So if this match 1, then the vulnerability we can actually just use the status variable that we already set up here, I'm pretty sure. So alright, so we've done that. In order to actually output it to the checklist file, we need to create an XML writer object. Let's go ahead and do that, and let's see if this works. Alright, so it's actually a little out of scope how to create an XML writer object, but this is the syntax. It's not too bad. It's just utilizing a C# function. Alright, so here's what we'll do. We'll take our final destination variable. We'll set it here. And we'll set this here. And let's see if that works. So we should have a checklist that got output called STIG output. And that did not work. So let's actually do this. And see if that works, which is what we initially tried. But I'm kind of second guessing myself. Alright, so that actually does work here. So the status is not a finding. If you wanted to put some finding details and comments, that was actually from this initial vuln variable, we just need to save that to a variable. Let's get finding details too. So that way you can also set that here. See if that works, so we can actually output in the finding details what it's set to, and we could do comments if we want. On X date, you can even set an date variable above if you want. We can actually go over that, but let's just see if this works. Sorry, cleared. Oh. Comment. I misspelled it somewhere. Oops. So we're still manipulating the STIG output here. Alright, so this has been configured accordingly, but as you can see, it kind of it just doesn't look that good in the output, so we kind of want to just get this. Let's see if this is even worth troubleshooting. I mean, you could just set it to a variable. Integer. It's not actually going to be an integer since we're... I think it just... Alright, let's see what happens here. Let's stop writing that host, by the way. Oh. I can't believe I didn't just put an equal sign. Alright. Is it because I still didn't call this variable? It is. So I didn't just call the variable that we just created. This is like debugging 101. Here it is. It's still outputting that. Oh. You know, it's a Saturday morning. I just like to stress that. There we go. So, we're actually outputting what it's set to, checked by STIG script on whatever date. And again, this is just like kind of how one methodology could be to go ahead and check a bunch of different vulnerability numbers. Like, you could do it one by one like this if you wanted to. When you actually import SCAV results, there's 47 not reviewed items. From my experience, there has only been, I think there's only 2 items that I personally couldn't figure out how to automate, or just didn't have the time to. One of them is checking for alternate operating systems. But yeah, if you guys wanted to, we could do a much longer video where we actually cover how to do the full STIG. But this is how to go about doing it.